Resourceful Designer, episode 243, Learning to Let Go.
Welcome to the Resourceful Designer podcast, offering solutions to streamline your graphic and web design business so you can get back to designing. And now your host. He'd love it if you left a review for the show on Apple Podcasts. Mark DeCote.
Yes, I would. Now, contrary to popular belief, ratings and reviews on Apple do not help your podcast get found. That's a false statement that a lot of podcasters make on their show. But how reviews and ratings do help is by letting people know who find the show how much you love it. It's extra encouragement. When they see a bunch of fellow designers saying how much they enjoy a podcast, they'll be more inclined to give it a try. So if you enjoy Resourceful Designer and you haven't done so already, why not leave me a review? 5 stars preferably, but it's entirely up to you. To make it easy, follow this link, resourcefuldesigner.com/Apple Podcasts. Anyway, in this episode, I'm going to talk about growing your design business by letting go of what's holding you back. I'm also going to share another tip that could help you manage your browser tabs. Now, what have I been up to? Well, I took a much-needed break over the holidays. It's been a few weeks since I put out an episode, and I can tell you that the 2 weeks over Christmas and New Year span, I put in, I think, probably a maximum of 6 hours of work during that part. And some of that was just doing my end-of-year bookkeeping, sending out some last-minute invoices and that sort of thing. So it was really nice to take some time off. But since I've been back this week, I've completed 3 podcast cover artworks, 2 of them approved, 1 of them waiting for final approval. I started 1 logo design, got another one to get going as well. I've updated a bunch of websites. I also cleaned my office, which if you're a longtime listener of the podcast, you know that that's a big deal for me. And I'm also getting things ready to reopen the Resourceful Designer community for new members. Now, quite a few people have signed up for the waiting list to be notified when it does reopen, which will be very soon, by the way. And those on the list will get an extra bonus for their patience. So if you're the least bit interested in the Resourceful Designer community, why don't you head on over to resourcefuldesigner.com/community and add your name to the list, and I'll send you an email when enrollment is open again. And now it's time for this week's tip of the week. And this week's tip is Chrome browser groups. Now, a couple of episodes ago, I shared how to turn Chrome browser tabs into desktop apps. And I got so many responses thanking me for that tip that I thought I'd share another Chrome-based tip. Now, I have not checked this in every other browser. I did try in Safari, and I couldn't figure out how to do it there, so I don't think it's available. I did not try in Firefox or any others. So if Chrome is not your browser of choice, then maybe this isn't of interest to you. But if you do use Chrome, then this may be new for you. Now, if you have a bunch of related browser tabs open, for example, you may have several tabs open for different stock image sites. Or if you're a web designer, you may have tabs open for each of your client websites. Well, after a while, all these tabs can get really hard to navigate. Now, an easy way to organize this tab chaos is with tab groups. Now, in Chrome, right-click on any tab and select Add to New Group. Or if you already have a tab group created, the menu will change to Add to Group, and a pop-out will appear for you to either choose an existing group or to create a new one. Now, when creating a new group, you can name it whatever you want, such as stock images or client websites or whatever. But the best thing about it is you can also assign a color to it, which makes it very easy to navigate. And once a tab group is created, simply right-click on any tab and click Add it to the group. Now, a tab group appears in your tab bar just like any other tab. The difference is all the tabs you put in the group can be opened or collapsed into the tab group. So for example, let's say you have 10 client websites that are all open in tabs in a group. Well, clicking it will expand it to show all 10 tabs, and each one will be underlined with the color you assign the group. So if you assign the group blue, all those tabs will have a blue underline and they'll all be next to each other. And it makes it very easy to know which sites are part of that tab. So if it's your client websites you know that everything underlined in blue is a client website. They're all part of that tab group. And when you're done looking at your client websites, you simply click on the group tab and all 10 of those websites will collapse into one tab. So instead of having 10 tabs on your browser window, now you have one tab that's blue that says client websites. So it's freeing up a lot of your browser window, making it much easier to navigate all your different tabs. And you can have multiple groups if you want. You can have all your stock image sites there, all your client sites, and everything else. I have a tab for my hockey pool. I have several websites for my fantasy hockey league that I belong to. I have several tabs that I keep open because I'm constantly checking things. Well, I have them in a group that makes it really easy. I know that the red tab on my browser, if I ever need to look at any of the hockey stuff, I just click on it and all those windows or those tabs open up in that window. So as I said, it makes it so much easier to navigate. And this is a great solution for anyone like me who keeps dozens, if not even more, tabs open all at once. I mean, sometimes I'm sure I have over 100 tabs open, but now it makes it so much easier to organize them. Now, one thing to note if you're testing this out for the first time, you cannot collapse a tab group until you have a tab on that browser window that is not part of that group. So if all the tabs in the open window are part of the same group, it won't let you collapse it. But as soon as you add a tab that's not part of that group, then you can. So I hope you find this useful. I know ever since I discovered it, I've been using it, and I know some people say, well, why don't you just close those? Well, every once in a while, I like to just take a quick peek and make sure everything's running okay. So it's very easy to just click the client website tab. They all open up. I can quickly go through and see that all the yellow ones are my client websites. I click on each one of them and double check everything's good, close the tab group. So that's this week's tip of the week. And now, learning to let go. I want to start with a story. A young boy is visiting his grandparents' house with his mom and dad. As young boys will do when in an environment that's not meant for young boys, they explore and sometimes get into trouble. Well, this young boy just so happened to be walking around with an antique vase, a precious family heirloom. When his mother spotted him, she immediately told him to put the vase down before he breaks it. But the boy replied to his mother that he couldn't. His hand was stuck inside. A little frustrated, the mother takes the vase and tells the boy, if you were able to get your hand in the vase, you surely can get it out. But she pulls and pulls, and there's just no give. Hearing the commotion, the father comes in to help. He too tugs at the vase, but the boy's hand is firmly stuck. He tugs and tugs until the boy says that it's hurting him. The grandmother, in her wise old ways, suggests using butter to help the hand slide out, but alas, it has no effect. Completely perplexed, the mother still holding and tugging onto the vase, the father throws his hands up in frustration, stating, I'd give $50 right now just to get that hand out of the vase. The young boy's eyes open wide with excitement. Really? He exclaims. Suddenly, they hear a clinking sound and the boy's hand slides easily out. In disbelief, the mother looks into the vase, then upturns it, and into her hand falls a quarter. The young boy explains that it's the quarter the grandpa gave him when they arrived. He had put it in the vase, but when he reached in to grab it, his hand got stuck. But when his dad said he'd give him $50 if he got his hand out of the vase, he let go of the quarter. Now, I'm sure that you've heard this, or at least a variation of this story before. You probably knew the outcome of the story before I ever reached it. But I wanted to tell it anyways, as a kind of analogy to your design business. So many designers who run their own business tend to hold on to that metaphorical quarter when they should be letting go of it for bigger and better things. Now, this is the first episode of 2021, and I don't have to tell you what kind of year 2020 was. You were there. But with all of that, let's call it a fiasco behind us, and the light of better things to come finally peeking through at the end of the tunnel, now is the perfect time to take stock of your business and figure out what you need to do to help it grow and to help it succeed. What are you going to do more of? And what, if anything, can you let go? No business, design or otherwise, can grow without making changes. Restaurants change their menus regularly. Telecommunication companies change their phone plans. Governments elect new officials. On and on throughout every industry. Changes are the natural precursor to growth, and every successful business does it. And when I say grow for you, I don't necessarily mean taking on more design work or taking on more clients, although that may be the case and it still counts as growth. What I mean by grow is making progress, expanding while focusing on your goals. You do have goals for your business, don't you? Without them, how will you know if you're making any progress? To know more about goal setting, listen to episode 55 of the podcast, which is setting goals for your design business. Now, the year 2020 was an abnormality by anybody's standards, so let's try to just forget it ever happened. If we take 2020 out of the equation and compare this upcoming year, 2021, or whatever year for that matter, if you happen to be listening to this in the future, whatever year is coming up when you're listening to this, when we compare the upcoming year to your previous years, you should be striving to not only make more money, but also be more satisfied with yourself and your business than you've been in previous years. At the very least, you should aim to stay on par with what you did in previous years. What you don't want is to be stepping backward. If you make less money or aren't as happy, you're doing something wrong. And chances are, it's because you're holding on to that metaphorical quarter and not letting go. Now, growing your design business and making more money doesn't necessarily mean doing more work, which in turn could increase your stress level. In fact, you can grow your design business and make more money by doing less but smarter work. Now, the easiest way to do this is to raise your rates. And if you want to know more about raising your rates, I did write a blog post a while back that you can check out at resourcefuldesigner.com/raiseyourrates. That's all one word. But in order to raise your rates, you have to let go of the notion that you're not worth the higher rates or that your clients won't pay the higher rates. You have to let go of that fear. Thousands of designers have already debunked that theory that you're not good enough or not worth that when they started charging more money for their businesses and they didn't fail, myself included. I can tell you that I make more money today putting in 10 hours of work than I did 5 years ago doing 30 or 40 hours of work. How is that? It's because I let go of the notion that an hour of my time is worth X amount of dollars. When I started charging clients based on what I thought their projects were worth and not by how much time I thought it would take me to complete it, I started making a whole lot more money. And you know what? The only clients that objected to my price increase were the clients I didn't really want to work with to begin with. Those who always complained or always wanted changes. And those clients who did not object to the price increase were the clients who truly valued what I do. And you know what? When I raised my rates, they actually started bringing me bigger and better projects to work on. They stopped sending me the simple little things to design and started sending me entire campaigns to work on. It's that perceived value that I talked about a few weeks ago in episode 240. The exact same service that I provided to these clients was perceived as being much more valuable because of the higher rates. And because of that, they were willing to pay me much more for those services and trust me with bigger and better jobs. Want another way to look at it? Consider a Rolex watch and a Timex watch. Both timepieces fit nicely on your wrist. Both tell time. And both can make you look pretty darn good fashion-wise. And yet, the Rolex is worth so much more than a Timex. Why is that? Is it because of what they're made of? I mean, there may be a difference in price with the actual materials of each watch, but I doubt it's enough of a difference to justify the huge difference in cost to purchase each one. Is it the craftsmanship? Both are precision instruments, and they're crafted to do what they are supposed to do, to function, to tell time. Is it the actual mechanics inside? I don't think so. As far as I know, the mechanics of a watch haven't really changed that much since they were first invented. So what is it? What's the real difference between the price discrepancy of a Rolex and a Timex? It's not the watches themselves. It's actually the companies behind the watches. They're the ones who create the value. Rolex has always marketed itself to the elite, to the A-listers, and therefore has an elite price tag to match. Whereas Timex has always marketed itself to the general populace, the everyday person, and therefore has a price to match. Their value is exactly where they've set it for themselves. Both companies are very successful. However, and of course I'm just speculating here, but I bet Timex has to sell a whole lot more watches than Rolex does in order to stay in business. You have a say in how your design business is perceived, which in turn dictates how much clients are willing to pay you for your services. Do you want to take on dozens and dozens and dozens of small paying projects? Or would you prefer work on a few high paying, very satisfying projects? Are you a Timex or are you a Rolex? Look at my podcast branding business, for example. Time and time again, clients tell me that they chose my business, which is one of the more expensive options in the podcast space. They chose me because I looked the most professional and I instilled a sense of confidence in them that I know what I'm doing and that they would get quality work from me. Because of that, they were willing to pay me more for my services than hire any of the less expensive options. So let go of that notion that you're not good enough or that you're not worth enough, because it's not true. Even the most inexperienced designer, a student fresh out of school or somebody that's learning on their own, is worth much more than they actually know. Now, I've been talking a lot about prices here, but there are other ways that you can let go in order to grow your design business. Look at the services you offer. Are there any of the services that you're just not that keen on doing? If so, then why do you offer them? Even a general all-purpose graphic designer can set limits on what they do. When I started my podcast branding business a couple of years ago, I offered social media graphics, but I quickly realized that I really don't like doing them. So I eliminated that service. I still offer to create the branding for my clients' social media platforms, but I no longer create the graphics for their individual social media posts. Just because every designer around you seems to be offering website design doesn't mean that you have to as well. If you don't like designing websites, even if you know how to, you don't have to. Let it go and concentrate on the things you do like designing. Not every designer enjoys designing logos, and not every designer is good at it either. If you don't like doing logos, stop offering it as a service. It's okay to let these things go and concentrate on the things you are good at and the things you enjoy doing. In a way, it's kind of like niching down. I've talked about the benefits of niching before on several episodes of the podcast. You can easily find them by doing a quick search for niche on Resourceful Designer. Well, culling your design services is a form of niching. In fact, it could set you apart from other designers and make you more desirable to clients. Look at Ian Paget from Logo Geek. His entire business is focused around designing logos. The first thing you see when you visit his website at logogeek.uk is the phrase, "I design logos." You can't get much clearer than that. Now, if you know Ian, and I do know him personally, you'll know that his background is actually in designing websites. And yet nowhere on his current site does he mention that. Why? Because it's not what he wants to do. Ian is passionate about logos, so that's what he's offering. He let go of everything else he knows how to design, because he can design a lot of different things. He let go of all those other things to focus on the one thing. And you know what? He's killing it in the logo design space. Now, I'm not saying you have to go to that extreme, but it's a great example of how letting go can help propel you forward. Now, one thing to note is removing a service from your offering doesn't necessarily mean never doing it. Ian, for example, still offers other design services to his clients besides logo design. He just doesn't advertise it because it's not his passion. But if a client asks him, he's willing to do them. In my case, if one of my clients asks me to create a social media post for them, I can say yes if I feel like doing it for them. There's nothing stopping me. I just don't advertise it as a service anymore. I'm starting to ramble here, so let's get back on topic. It's okay to let things go in the name of progress. In fact, it's somewhat necessary if you truly want to succeed. Ask any successful designer running their own business if they're doing the same thing today that they were doing 5 years ago, and the majority, if not all of them, would answer no. You have to evolve if you want to survive in this industry. If you don't, then you'll lose out to all those around you who do. So take this time. The start of the year seems like a perfect opportunity. Look ahead. Examine your business. Do an audit. Figure out what things you're good at, what things you want to concentrate on, and figure out what things you want to let go. Don't get your hand stuck in the vase grasping a quarter when there's much bigger things out there that you can be going after. Well, that's my 2 cents worth. Now, I would love to know what you thought of this episode. Please leave me a comment by visiting resourcefuldesigner.com/episode 243. So thank you very much. Before I go, I want to remind you of the tip of the week, which is the Chrome tab groups. Check it out and let me know if it helps you organize your browser tabs. And as I mentioned at the beginning, the Resourceful Designer community will be reopening very soon, and the first people to gain access will be those on the waiting list. So if you have any interest in joining the community, please visit resourcefuldesigner.com/community and sign up to be notified. So that's it for me. Time for me to get back to work, do some more designing, and to start thinking what I'm going to discuss in next week's episode of the podcast. Until then, I am Mark DeCote, wishing you all the best with your design business and reminding you to stay creative.
Thanks for listening to the Resourceful Designer Podcast at resourcefuldesigner.com.